Happy Thursday, everyone. Clint Skutchan, checking in with another edition of Organized Real Estate. I'm doing this one, believe it or not, starting to get back out and on the road. So I'm live at an airport today. So if you hear some background noise, thank you for demonstrating what that'll be like out of the gate here. But with me is the infamous Greg Robertson. Hey, Greg, how are you, sir?
All right, Clint, how are you? Infamous,
I'm
huh?
good. Yeah,
I'll take that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You've earned it at this point. I was going to pull up my Tripit, app and show you my travel itinerary because I saw you said you missed your Tripit so much the other day, and I got to use it. I had to remember how to share my travel itinerary the other day through Tripit.
Yeah, I think for those of us that did a lot of business travel, that was a great app for keeping track of things in one place. Love the simple design of that thing. It really served it. It did one job very well.
Yeah,
kind of great software.
Tell me a little bit before we jump in, and we've got some pretty heady, I think, topics today, and even some hot off the press kind of news we can discuss this morning. But before we get there, tell me about your first VW.
First VW
Volkswagen,
I had was,
for those that don't know.
Yeah, it was a Volkswagen Bug. I think it was a 72. It was my first car. It was yellow, which as just in at the end of high school was not like a particular great color that I wanted, but
I was going to say the height of masculinity there.
And but I loved it. I mean, took it and got to college, drove me to my campus every day, and just had a lifelong affinity for that. Later on, as I was right out of college, started my first company and had no money at all. I got like a 67 Volkswagen bus, so the kind of hippie van, as people would describe it, and drove that for a long time until I lost that to unpaid parking tickets, and then just started making enough money where I got a real car. But now it all goes back to the beginning, because now I own a very nice 62 Volkswagen Beetle and a 1960 Volkswagen microbus. So yeah.
For those that don't follow you on social media, they should, because those things are pimped out. And then you do the whole tour, like you go and like hang out with other like VW aficionados, right?
Well, here's the thing. In Huntington Beach, they have in Southern California, there's a strong car culture here, right? And especially in the VW community. But what's one thing is lucky, there's actually a very famous car show that happens at a donut shop about 3 blocks away from here, and they call it Donuts and Derelicts, and it's every Saturday, and they start at like 5 a.m. The old guys get out there, and every type of imaginable hot rod, VW, anything you can think of, Lambos, Corvette, everything shows up to this thing. And they just, everybody parks their car, shows them off, has some coffee and donuts, and tries to bug out of there before the all the stores in that mall open up at 9 o'clock. So it's pretty easy to get to. So I spend I go about every other time.
That's cool, man. Yeah, I both of those that you have look like they're beautifully restored. So nicely done.
Yeah, the Bug more than the bus, but yeah.
Well, let's jump into some of the things that are happening. I mean, nothing going on in real estate these days, right? At all. Like no subject matter for podcasts or blogs. They would just sit around and wish for something to happen.
Yeah, nothing. Nothing. I mean, the news hasn't stopped since 2016, even probably before that. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, the veracity of it, I think, is picking up, and we'll get to this morning's news, which is really interesting, about Spencer Rascoff coming back in with a SPAC, and while kind of dancing around it, really going to be directly competing with Zillow, which gets really interesting.
Absolutely.
I want to talk a little bit about this, and I don't know if it's a coining a term or just making up a word, but I really see in real estate today this publicization of the, it's not privatization, it's publicization of all these things, whether it's the different types of mergers and acquisition activities that are happening, the SPACs, the investment, going public movement that we're seeing. You've kind of lived some of that and experienced it directly with your recent acquisition of the company. I think most folks know you for with W&R Studios and your CMA products, but you were acquired. So why would you entertain that? I know it's a passion for you. It's still a passion, your business, but you got to the point where it must have made some business sense to do this. And so talk a little bit about your experience as we're seeing this movement.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. When I first started, my first real estate software company back in 1992, your typical vendor was like, his wife was a realtor, he was an engineer at our IBM. She came back and complained some problems that she was having. He would build her a little app, and then the app, the agent would start using the app. The broker took notice, and then these kind of like in the garage type of little companies that grew up to be big companies. And there's a lot of those when I started. Now it's become so systematized with these um, incubators and the capital. It's like a young guy comes in with an idea, and boom, they're going to give him $5 million to start and do that idea. It's just becoming the capital, the amount of money, I mean, being brought into this industry, and the types of all the myriad of products and services and ideas that are put in there are like astounding. You've never seen something like that happen, right? And then the companies that were starting off medium or small are just getting bigger, bigger, and bigger, right? So the landscape has changed so much. um it's just too topsy-turvy. I mean, I watched this, I saw this tweet from Chris Smith, which I just love. It was really kind of explains to me, because I thought I had a pretty good handle what was organized real estate and prop tech. But so the tweet was something like, so real estate companies want to become tech companies, and tech companies now want to become real estate companies. That makes sense, right? And it doesn't. Because if you're looking at things right now, that's exactly what's happening. Keller Williams wants to be a software company. Zillow wants to be a brokerage. What? I don't, it's just such a weird, it's a weird confluence of things that are happening right now, that you're a small or medium company like we were, small. You have all these things, all these different things turning around in your head. You realize you gotta partner up. You got to find a dance partner in here if you're looking to receive any more scale or anything else, because it's the stakes are just getting too big. The capital being brought in here is just too much.
It's interesting. I have a couple thoughts on that. One, I've heard you talk about why ultimately, the folks at Lone Wolf are a good fit with you, and this idea of a seamless transaction was something that you could support. So there's that piece, and then the other piece that I think I might have you touch on is that, well, I'm seeing all this stuff happening around me, and I'm small potatoes by comparison to everything, so I need to partner up. I think that would apply to our associations and MLS friends that are watching today. And so I'm curious as to, and maybe that's the secondary conversation for us, as to your thoughts on how our association MLS friends should be looking at that. But talk about that seamless transaction piece, and I think it's not just about this want to make it convenient for the consumer, but of course collect revenue along the way, right? So that, I know that was a part of why you chose Lone Wolf as a partner, and it made sense for you.
Right. I mean, a little bit's going back to what I was concerned about is that if we ever, Dan and I ever thought about doing this, it's like we liked our position at W&R Studios as kind of Switzerland, right? Where we work with all the vendors, all the brokers, we had an open API. So we were very much in a space of like being able to work with everybody. I knew that if we partnered up with an MLS vendor or maybe one of the portals, that would put us on one line, one side of the line in the sand, or whatever you want to call it, right? So Lone Wolf gave us the ability. They too work with a ton of different vendors. They had a marketplace where they were very open with working with other vendors that could kind of tap into their ecosystem, right? So I saw that fit. Plus, then you think about the natural kind of evolution of transaction management software, and their vision is to simplify real estate, which matched ours. But to me, if you're starting what's the earliest part of a transaction, right? Well, it's before it becomes a transaction, right? It's before it even becomes a listing. When is that? Well, that's the CMA, right? The realtor has the earliest signal that a house is going to be sold by getting a client of theirs to call them up and saying, hey, I think I'm going to sell my house. And it's just, to me, seems so natural and a thing to, like, I could explain it to anybody. Well, how does Cloud CMA fit into a transaction management? I tell you where it fits in, right at the very beginning, right? So if you're trying to eliminate dual entry, if you're trying to get things started from the very beginning, I think the CMA is the perfect position for that. So I just didn't have to do a lot of thinking of like, well, where is this going to fit in? How do we do this? Or it was very apparent to me, and I was very apparent to Lone Wolf as well, of how that was going to fit in for sure.
Do you think if you hadn't done that environmental scan and looked at the landscape and said, "Whoa, man, maybe we've got to be partnering up," that you even would have really thought through the right partner? In other words, is there a mindset that has to be applied to the idea of partnering up or looking at opportunities even before it's a whatsoever a reality, a concept, or whether even your competitors are considering it?
Yeah, I mean it's tough because I know the investment banker we work with was laughing with us because we were like his longest term client because we were so picky and we didn't need to sell really. We were a profitable lifestyle kind of company and having a good time doing it, right? But I think, it depends on the company. If you if you're struggling, if you really need some extra help or, that you see that you don't have the resources to get to that next level, well, that's a different conversation you have to have, right? If I think if we continued to stay independent, we'd probably, we'd have to change our business model a little bit, maybe even go a little bit more niche, right? And just adjust our size to be happy with that, right? But I consider myself kind of a student of the industry and watching the things. I just see there's a part of me that says, man, we could scale this to be much bigger and a much more part of the ecosystem out there. I mean, I think like Lone Wolf did, 222 million signatures, digital signatures last year, right? I mean, that's incredible scale, right? I mean, we publish over 230,000 CMAs every month for our clients, right? So um, I think, when you have some things that naturally kind of, to me, fit together and we can even make it easier for clients, that's compelling. I think that makes you stop and think, what can we do here?
Let me ask you about one more element, and I think it's then all of this is going to collectively lead us into, kind of talking about lessons for associations and MLSs. How did you get to a point where you're okay letting go of control through this? When you get acquired, you're going to lose some control, and you're an entrepreneur. You built this thing. This is your baby. Like, so there's no one entity that has more of this. I don't want to give up my control than an entrepreneur who's grown something from the ground. So how did you get comfortable with that concept going through this process?
Right. So there's millions of reasons why you get comfortable with that, and they're in the form of a dollar, right? So that's how you get comfortable with it, right? So you in your head you're making that trade off, right? You're selling this asset, but it's not like that Dan and I got nothing for this, right? We made it. We made a decision, right? And they made a good offer to make that decision. Not easy, but more palatable. Then the question becomes when you're in that situation and you're like me. I love what I do. I love this industry. I love the people in the industry. I want to stay engaged. This gives, I still want a platform. um then it becomes three things. Am I learning anything? I'm learning so much right now, Clint. Absolutely. Am I being challenged? Yeah. Lone Wolf, like a lot of companies, has a lot of challenges out there, right? So I'm definitely being challenged. Number three is like, what is it like working with the people? Um, we have the same people at WNR that started are still with Lone Wolf now, right? And I'm getting to know the people at Lone Wolf a lot better than I did before, and they're good people. So if I'm learning and I'm being challenged and I'm working with good people, hey man, that's a good mix. I mean, these challenges are different than what I had at WNR for sure. But everybody, not everybody gets in that situation. Sometimes you can't do that. I don't know if I'm going to be challenged, if I'm going to enjoy this role for 2 years or 4 years or 10 years. Right. But if those three criteria keep happening, I'll be here for sure.
Yeah, and I bring that up just because we hear that often, in terms of the work that we do around what typically it looks like in the association MS space, where we see these things happen, which is through consolidation, right? Which are oftentimes these protracted, heavily politicized, conversations that the business aspects, the dollar amounts that get people to decision making, as you pointed out, sometimes are on the back burner, if on the burner at all. And so we kind of point this out to say, all these things that you're sharing, I do think that our MLS and association leaders around the country need to get into that mindset of thinking about partnering up before it's even really a realistic thing. Getting comfortable with the idea of what would cause you to be comfortable with giving up whatever perceived control you have. And so, you see where I'm going with this in terms of what are the lessons and this all this stuff that's happening around the association and MLS in terms of, tech companies like yourself or the brokerage companies themselves. What would you say to them? What should they be learning from all this activity that's happening around them right now?
Yeah, I think it's tough. Change is tough, right? And I think for a lot of my customers, colleagues, friends, right? They didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to hear that, oh, you guys, oh man, you guys are being acquired by, X big company or whatever, right? Um, because they like to have that kind of small independent thing sometimes, right? But I will tell you, having worked here for 2-3 months now, I see a lot of things that this company does that I think are really, really smart, right? So you have to be open to new ideas. You got to be open that maybe the ways you were doing things were not, the best way, or they were one way, but there's other ways of doing that maybe are more efficient and better, right? The other thing though is that I can lend my experience to Lone Wolf, right? And some of the nuances of online real estate or organized real estate, right? That they may not have considered, right? So I'm trying to affect change within the company on a positive level, but at the same time, I'm looking at things they're doing. I'm like, oh man, shoot, I wish we would have done that at W&R because that's so smart, right? So it goes both ways. And just the other thing I would say is that you got to please consider the founders and the people that are going over there, right? I mean, they've made some big life decisions here, right? A lot of times I think I see a lot of people demonize whether it's the CEO of the company or the president on a of the board or a founder or something, of like doing something like, oh, why are you even talking that MLS? Why are you even talking that association? Those guys are the whatever. I mean, no, you got to let those things down. You got to learn, got to have those discussions to learn. Sometimes these old rivalries, these old kind of things are just that. Nobody even knows why they started the feud, why they started those things, right? I see that a lot happening in the MLS space and association space, right? Um, so yeah, I mean, you just got to be open to ideas and be willing to learn and be willing to, but also, I think anytime two good organizations get together, they learn from each other too, and both have to be open to that.
I would agree with that. One of the other things that you touched on that I think is a lesson and something that I'm hearing more about is, if you're not looking to partner, I just don't want to say all things have to be the same for everyone. If you're looking to partner up and it doesn't make sense for you ultimately, then the kind of counter thinking that you mentioned is, if I wasn't going to partner up, I had to get even maybe more niche and be more like beneficial to those that I am serving and might serve. And I think I'm hearing more of that from, and we're even engaging in some work with clients that are saying, yeah, we've been down this road. We just don't feel like that's the answer for us. So we want to get more niche. We want to almost become a boutique MLS
Sure.
offering. And I think there's space for that, but I don't know that anyone's ever really taken that approach or applied that mindset fully. They all say we're special, but they don't do anything to become special. And to be able to compete based on difference rather than scale. And I think that is a great point that you'd mentioned. And obviously you went through that thought process and didn't land on that. But to me, it seems like there's some viability to that thinking.
Yeah, I think constraints are always a good thing, right? I think when Dan and I started this, I remember when we started at first, like, we're never going to have over 20 people in our company. We're just going to keep it lean. But I think as you get more successful, as you reach more scale, it's like, you have more ambition than that, right? So if you're going to go down that path, and I think there's some companies out there that definitely can do that. That's okay. That's a great thing. I mean, we always got pegged with a moniker lifestyle company, right? Which, in some circles, like VC circles, are like, oh, they're just a lifestyle company. Hey man, if it's bringing you a good lifestyle, that's a great thing. We enjoyed that for a long. We thought that we were going to do that for a long time, right? And we're comfortable with that. But you know, when you get when you see a fit, when the offer is good, sometimes you might change your mind on that. And I think that's what happened to us for sure.
There's a question from Ryan that came into us, and I'll get your thoughts on this. He's saying, with all this activity and the flurry of investments and money that's flying around, much of this is related to the data and the provisions coming from the MLS. Should the MLS get a cut?
should the
I'm
MLS
curious.
get a cut?
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, that's that. I think that there's a model there that I thought about, like, of doing, like, if let's here's just an idea, and just it'll loosely answer the question, right? What about doing a small offering of your equity as somebody in this space, to a group of MLSs, right? Say, listen, we're going to open up 10%, 20%, 15%, whatever of our equity, we're going to share with key partners, right? So that the MLS or your whatever customers that it might be, brokerages, will have a way of participating in case an exit happens. I think that's a viable way of doing things, right? I think that there's nothing wrong with that. So
Under those circumstances, what would, I mean, is it just the data provisions that would be their collateral for that equity, or how would you see that? Or is that okay, if you really want to get a cut, then you got to pony up and invest?
Well, no, I think it'd be an investment for sure. I mean, I think it's ponying up and putting some cash on the table for sure, right? And then it's like with any partner, you're going to hopefully help them succeed in their business, right? So yeah, I think, I was not talking about like goodwill. No, I was talking about
Okay, yeah,
cash.
I want to be clear about that, because yeah, just to say, oh well, we provide this, therefore we should get this. I think that's a part of it. And here's one of the other things I think I'm seeing evolve is this understanding of what data utilization looks like on an MLS perspective. So we've been really great at creating data repositories that sit there and in many instances die on the vine, or maybe help provide services through third-party products like yours. But in terms of utilizing and even monetizing the data that's incorporated within MLSs, that's just not really done. And so to me, if you wanted to trade on data, you'd have to demonstrate that you actually have a monetization ability with that data to begin with. So you can't just say, just because we provided it inherently has value. You have to be able to, in a business setting, say, here's the value specifically that it does present. So you can't just say, just because we're doing something good, we therefore deserve a part of the cut, in my opinion, because that's not how business works. If it was, I'd be doing a lot better. I'd be a gazillionaire like you.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that, but no, I mean, the only thing I caution that with is, like, there has been many business model of trying to monetize MLS data on Wall Street. What was it? Real Big, I think, was a model back in the day. I think RPR started with that. Hey, we're going to do this. I think there's some associations right now that think that we're going to package this up and still sell this data to Wall Street and make $1 billion. I've never seen those things, actually, any one of those types of models come to fruition. Not that
the thing that I like about it, Greg, and why I see it, the MLS has had such a high quality integrity aspect of how the data is used and respected it. And so to me, and they haven't, there's this onus back to the brokers, right? Not to use it in a way that's detrimental to them or the consumers that they serve. So to me, I think there are ways, and because of the way that the MLSs are structured, I think they have an integrity to them that maybe a private entity wouldn't, where they could utilize that data to help the market itself. And just for example, our home index, that we released, our home demand index with Bright, that's a tremendous example of taking and utilizing the data and giving it back in a way that helps to inform the market. And ultimately, if we do more of that, I think there's real value to that, to outside of real estate entities that could utilize that to help communities, which then help housing. So that's kind of what I'm thinking, and why the MLS
I think
might have
there's
some
something
validity.
There's something to that, because I think right now a lot of these hedge fund managers and all the other stuff, they're getting that data, but it's basically gray data, right? They're getting from other nefarious sources that it might be the same data the MLSs provide, but because we haven't, as an industry, put that out there, right? That people are kind of coming up with nefarious ways of getting that data, right? Because there's not really one solution out there to kind of provide that from what you say, from the MLS's perspective of really culling and standardizing and checking to make sure that all that data is correct, for sure.
Well, let's go to some hot off the presses stuff. And speaking of privatization or publicization, as I was mentioning earlier, interesting news this morning where Spencer Raskoff, who's been very active with the SPACs, and for those that are just getting accustomed to this terminology, special purpose acquisition companies. Essentially, it expedites the process of going public. Is my snapshot on that. But Spencer Rascoff involved with OfferPad, which
Yeah.
gets really interesting, right? Because, you know, as a former Zillow exec and with Zillow's activities, you know, in the last few years, that to some degree puts him back in the game in direct competition. And so I know you saw that news this morning. What was your response?
Yeah. So to me, and again, this is all scuttlebutt. I have no inside knowledge of this, but when Rich Barton decided to take the reins back at Zillow, and Spencer's stepped away, my thought, I talking with a lot of others, was that, well, Spencer was more comfortable running a media company, right, and not this type of entity that Zillow was becoming. And Rich Barton, I remember on an article written by Ben Thompson of Stratechery, really talked about how Open Door really was an existential threat to Zillow, and that he thought that he needed to pivot in a big way to do that. And I just thought, okay, well, Spencer wants to run a media company. Rich thinks there's a bigger opportunity that Zillow has. So, you know, they decide to part ways, right? And Spencer has been out there. He's also, you know, co-founded Picasso. He's co-founded an outfit out of LA to talk about the startup scene in LA, and those things. But I never really got the idea that there was a lot of, and there was some rumors out there that maybe he was kind of shown the door, but, you know, I didn't really put much merit in there. But the fact that he's investing in a SPAC that is directly competing with Open Door, or sorry, with Zillow and Open Door, I guess, with this OfferPad, is really, really interesting. I guess he's not taking over the CEO position, but he's investing in it. So his money is speaking that. So I think you could take it in one way, like, okay, nah, I'm doing this now too. Or you could just take it as, you know, Spencer's got a lot of money. He knows this real estate space, and he's hedging his bets. I mean, whatever narrative you want to put on it, you can put on it, right? But it is surprising. It's such a stark, I mean, it is really, you can draw the line. That's Zillow and that's OfferPad, right? So that's a direct that to me is the most striking thing about this investment.
Yeah, and I saw this morning, I guess it was a little surprising to me. I read, and I think it was GeekWire, that it did say in there that there was a spokesperson that said that Spencer did not have a non-compete, you know, with Zillow, which that was kind of interesting, which would obviously, that would be, I think, what many people would ask, well, how can he even do that? Wouldn't they have a non-compete in place? And so that's interesting. I think I lean more towards, you know, he's got an interesting podcast he actually does with his son, and he answers questions, and they just go back and forth, and they talked about SPACs. And so you kind of got a sense of his philosophy and how he sees them. And I think you're right. It's that investment play and an investment play in an area that he obviously has a huge level of expertise. But of course, you know, the rumor mills will, I'm sure, run wild just as they did over the last few weeks with other activities in terms of acquisitions. I want to transition a little bit into that, which is, you know, I heard you and Rob on your podcast talking with Errol Samuelson, which I thought was just such a great interview, by the way. If folks haven't checked that out, they should. And you talked a little bit about, you know, the realities of the showing time acquisition, and then, you know, even went back into, you know, Zillow and its history and where had it made mistakes, and asked Errol about that. And I thought that was just so insightful. But tell me a little bit about kind of your take now, especially having visited with folks that are directly involved and engaged in the showing time thing. You know, and I think I heard you say, is this the straw that breaks the camel back, or is this just another, you know, tilting at windmill scenario? What's your read now, a few weeks removed, and a number of conversations had since the announcement?
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. So two things, right? I think when the announcement came out, and Rob and I talked about this, and some of us in the industry are kind of let know, you know, are given a little bit of heads up. You know, sometimes it's a day, sometimes it's hours before the press release comes out. Typically, it's minutes before the press release is out. I'm at the bottom of that list, right? And I didn't think it was that big of a deal. It was like the biggest deal I thought was like, well, they had stopped buying real estate tool companies. You know, they bought Dotloop, but they had, you know, everything else was more related to the portal, right? You know, Street Easy and some other things, but not real estate tools. But I thought, okay, well, you know, good for, you know, good for Scott and Mike over there. But I didn't think it was a big whoop at all, right? Um, I thought it was just, you know, a smart acquisition because it's a great company. But the thing that I missed, that I think a lot of us missed is really there was two sides of this, right? There was the story that of Zillow buying a real estate software company, but then the other story was now that they are a broker, and I think actually Zillow kind of missed this as well. That Zillow's a broker and are now a participant in the MLS that is also a major vendor with the MLS, that causes problems just on an optics and perception level where, well, what do you mean? Imagine if like in Seattle, Windermere bought Showing Time or John L. Scott bought Showing Time, right? One of the major, brokers in that territory. And now, let me just use the Windermere and John L. Scott because there's always been a story, competition between them. Windermere is going to go, you mean I'm paying dues that are going to fund John L. Scott? That's crazy. That can't happen, right? That's going to stop right now, right? If you look in that context, you can kind of see the consternation that a lot of the brokers had when, and then if you add to that the history of Zillow saying they've never become a broker, all the kind of things that, that have gone on to that, it just started this whirlwind of, I thought the story would, drop out, 1-2 weeks, but that caused a lot of the agents, a lot of brokers to contact their MLSs and say, this cannot stand, right? So I think because Zillow was so new at becoming a broker, I don't think they thought ahead of time about this participant in the MLS becoming a major vendor of the MLS that really got this story a lot going longer than we thought, right? What do I think about it? I think that if you look at let's say Dotloop or some other ones, I mean, it seems like they've been hands off, although they've changed their terms of service. You could probably look to that. I don't think it's a privacy of data issue yet because they've committed to do that. What I really, honestly, just from a fellow entrepreneur, what I really disliked about the whole situation is, Matt, Scott Woodard and Michael Lane are quality people. Scott who founded Showing Time, and Mike, who's been in the industry forever. And for those guys to see that Showing Time name being, kind of put through the mud a little bit by the industry and others was really just disheartening to me. It really meant it was unfortunate because what a great company, what a great people. And to be caught up in all that kind of politics was just really, it was hard to see. It's hard to see, right? But we'll see. Yeah. We'll see. Again, our actions speak louder than our words. So we'll see how Zillow handles it going forward. I have high hopes for it. I think if Michael's there, he's like I was talked about with myself. I mean, he's hopefully going to be able to affect change and talk about the nuances. And they've got a lot of smart people at Zillow, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I would concur with the quality of the people at Showing Time and them not being pulled along and kind of the hatred that's out there. I feel like that was bad. And yeah, I think you're right. This assessment of the challenging of what is a subscriber or a member for associations and MLSs is being challenged. But if that's looking upstream, if you look downstream from many brokerages that have lots of ancillary services, indirectly they're making money off of the MLS listings too through these additional items too. So it's all about which the independents can say, oh, you guys you're gay. So I think this is a challenge, and the idea of truly having companies with verticals that are brokerages or is going to become more prevalent, and something that does challenge the concept of what it means to be a member or a subscriber or a vendor or whatever it might be. And that one's going to take some time to unravel.
No, sure. Again, and that I tell you, this is the conversations Dan and I had, 6 months ago. Like, what is happening here? It's dogs are sleeping with cats. Things are. I mean, it's just so weird right now. I don't have a good footing on what's going on in this industry, right? So how, that just was definitely in our mindset of like, what do we do here? I mean, what's a way forward? We can, as I said, go extremely niche, or what, right? I mean, it's just so, it's crazy right now. It's just crazy.
Yeah, I think again, it should be opening up to the concept of, regardless of where you fit into the real estate game, whether you're an organized real estate brokerage, whatever it might be, you've really got to start to do that assessment that I think you said you went through a few months ago. What about the idea of an MLS using a SPAC to go public? I mean, is that possible?
No,
Is that
no,
something
everything's
you could see,
possible.
or?
I would not be shocked at all. I would not be shocked at all, right? To see something like that happen, right? Especially some of these broker-owned MLSs, right, where they could have, some sort of power there for sure. I wouldn't be shocked by anything now, right?
Right.
It's crazy, right? Spencer Raskoff competing in a company directly, investing in a company that's directly competing with Zillow. That's crazy, right there. Right.
So we got to get a little crazy, right? If we're going to keep up, you got to get a little crazy, which is, for you and I, isn't that difficult, because I've hung out with you after hours. I know getting crazy is not an issue for either one of us. But I think, leadership within organized real estate does have to, get out of that. We've always done it this way. The protectionist attitude. I think competition is coming, directly to MLS like it's never come before, whether that's through other MLSs, moving into what they see now as emerging natural marketplaces for those that they already serve, or they see emerging and potential future marketplaces, or if it's a third party, all these different things. Competition for MLSs, I think, is something that I'm really coaching a lot of the organizations to think through. What does that look like, and how do you compete? Is it a scale thing? Is it a niche thing? And so with all this activity and movement, I think we have to be open to the crazy a little bit.
Yeah, and then there's a lot of innovation going on in MLSs right now. I like the MLS alliances that's being done in Northern California, where they're all, sharing the data. And I was involved a little bit with that because they wanted to make sure the Cloud CMA work with all those MLSs. And that's fantastic of those guys speaking together. I like what Art Carter's doing down in Sierra MLS, where he's kind of wholesaling MLS services. Sierra MLS is doing something in Louisiana. I mean, that's incredible. That's another thing you would think that's really kind of out of the box. What you're doing recently with T3 and Bright MLS, right? Adding, as I think Brian put it in the press release, making the MLS become more nimble and kind of changing the value prop of that. I mean, there's a lot going on out there. I think that is really, really, things that we should highlight and talk about, right? Not on a, maybe the financial stuff doesn't happen later, but the other stuff is pretty cool.
Awesome. Yeah. And Chris just popped in. If you haven't seen our home demand index, he just popped it into the chat. Greg, I want to do one quick kind of follow up on your conversation with Errol, because you asked him about, and we hear this all the time, especially over the last few weeks. Well, Zillow said they were never going to be a brokerage too. So there's this credibility issue. And when you had Errol on, you asked him, what was there a big mistake along the way that you would change or alter? And I thought he had good answer to that. But knowing that you asked that question, I think you might have some answers for that as well. Do you think there was one big misstep that if you were, put in charge and the head of Zillow, that you wished you could have erased from the record?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm not going to say that there was a credibility issue, right? I just think in a thing that's moving so fast, it's hard to make any sort of binary statements. I'm never going to do that, or I'm not going to do that. That's just a misstep, sure. But credibility, I mean, you can't fault anybody, for, if you look forward what they're doing now and like, what's going to happen 20 years from now, Zillow had to make a change, right? So I'm going to stop doing what I'm doing because I said something like, X years ago. Everybody changes. We all change. I'm sure there's statements that you've made that I've made 20 years ago that I would never do, that I've done, right? Because situations change. So I don't think it's a credibility thing. It's just a matter of like, realizing what, that you don't want to make those type of binary statements. Zillow, I mean, depending on the level of how you look at the success, I mean, I know shareholders would look at it differently than others, but it's a successful company, right? I mean, so, a lot of this stuff is being hated on because of success. But listen, I mean, I always say this, and this is kind of the premise of one of the book I wrote, The Art of the CMA. Zillow can't smell the cat. All the stuff we're talking about today, Clint, all the different things that we're talking about there, Nothing can replace the good eyes, ears, and nose of a good agent, right?
And the
I
intuition.
think and the intuition. I don't think, there's all this money being spent and everything else out there. There are more realtors today than when Zillow launched or when the Open Door launched ever. More people are using realtors today. 96% of people are using realtors today. That's the biggest attachment rate that NAR has kind of recorded. All right. So there's all this money that's being spent on trying to change everything. Think about that. There's more realtors than ever, and people are using realtors more than ever. Right. So that should be some signal that maybe we're just thinking a little bit too much about it. Right. Because culturally, as people, as humans, we want that trusted advisor. We want somebody to help us through these kind of large decision points through our life, right? So I don't think in the long run, I mean, these are things that I think we got to pay attention to, but it warms my heart to know that when I talk to my non-real estate friends that might be a real estate agent, they know nothing about SPACs and Zillow and this and that, right? They're just doing their jobs and helping their clients, build a family, basically.
Yeah, and I think when you talked about that binary statement, I think that was exactly as I heard Errol say it too, is that we shouldn't have made binary statements. But the thing was, they moved off of that binary statement. I think the problem is when you do make a binary statement and then you won't move off of it for fear of, oh, what if it compromises my credibility, when it's the right thing to do under the circumstances. And I sometimes think we get caught in that in the association MLS space, where we make binary statements and then we live by them forever and regardless, as things move and change around us. You and I could talk for hours about this one, but I want to lighten it up a little bit away from, like you said, SPACs and all these other things. You are this interesting, personality in our industry. You're like this pseudo media outlet as a blogger and your podcast, and you do what you do in terms of your actual day job. You're a vendor, you're an advocate for the industry. How did you get into this and fall into this kind of pseudo spokesperson role for the industry? And I know you don't see yourself that way, but it's true, and I know it to be true by how much people respond to you and repeat what you share out there. How did that happen?
Yeah, no, yeah.
Again, I know you well enough to really ask, how did that happen?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I think, and that goes with the infamous thing that you started off with. But I don't know. I think my father was the same way, and my sister's the same way. Is that I think the word now is authentic, right? But it seems to be whatever. I don't have a problem telling the emperor he has no clothes, right? I think that I can write and I can digest a whole story and try to put it down to 3 sentences, and hopefully it has a little bit of humor or wit, because I think any truth delivered with that, it's harder to hear. It's more of like a satirical thing. So I've never been afraid to kind of call truth to power in a sense, right? And the other thing is, like, I might make criticisms of other vendors or other software platforms or make design critiques or whatever, but I'm doing it myself, man. It's not like I'm just some pontificator out there just who doesn't do this. I'm in the same space as you. I'm open myself up. I've been criticized, a ton of times also, but I think I come from a perspective like, I'm in the arena with you. I can do this, right? But I've been somehow afforded the ability in the industry that I can say things. People tell me, I get texts and emails all the time for a particular blog post or a podcast, like, man, you ask exactly what I wanted to ask, or you say exactly what I can't say in front of these people, right? You do that. I love that, right? So I get that kind of feedback all the time. But I do look at it as something that's it's a privilege. It's not a right. So I try to honor that a little bit. And you know what? I still chill out. I think I want everybody to buy Lone Wolf software today and go to lwolf.com and click around and give me a call if we can set you up. Right. So I'm not above doing, something like that as well. But no, I do look at it as a privilege here that so far I'm afforded. I piss off a lot of people, but I change my mind a lot too. But I mean, that's just me. I'm just,
because you're learning every day. I think most daily learners are changing their minds every day. And you do you really, really well, Greg. I appreciate that. I'm like you. I don't know how else to be other than what I am. And I too enjoy and take humor in this industry. So thank you for sharing time. My TripIt notification's going off, so I got to go jump on my flight.
Yeah, great.
Don't
Well,
be,
I hope to join you in the airport soon here, as we all get back. I
yeah,
miss everybody out there.
or maybe an airport bar at a
Yeah,
minimum.
at a minimum.
Greg, greatly appreciate you taking the time. Thanks for the candor as always, and we'll catch up with you down the road.
All right, lwolf.com, everybody, remember.
At least it's not on the bottom of the coffee cup this time.
I'll talk to you guys later.
Thanks to everybody for tuning in. I literally am going to go jump a plane, but thanks for making us a part of your day, and we'll catch up with you again next month.
Thanks, Clint.
Later.